I don't know when it started, when I began noticing her more than I should have. Maybe it was the way she remembered my coffee order better than I did, or how her laugh came a beat late, like she was still deciding if she should share it at all. Most mornings, the cafe sat half empty, just the hum of an espresso machine and the click of cups on saucers. I came here before classes, before the day could push me into schedules and faces I didn't really care about. She was already there, most times, sitting by the window with a paperback she never seemed to finish. Always the same seat. Always the same small cup cooling beside her. I told myself it was just routine, a face you expect to see, like the barista or the old man who watered the plants out front. But I'd catch myself slowing down if I spotted her through the glass, almost rehearsing what I might say if we ended up in line together. One morning it happened. She was ahead of me, adjusting her scarf, distracted by her phone. The barista asked if she wanted her usual, and I almost laughed, because of course she had one too. Then she turned slightly, eyes landing on me. "You're the cappuccino with 1 sugar, right?" she asked. It threw me. I hadn't realized she'd been noticing me at all. Yeah? Yeah, that's me." I scratched the back of my neck, realizing how obvious it sounded. She smiled, small, private, and turned back to the counter. "Thought so. You always tap the lid twice before you sit down." I didn't know what to say to that. She wasn't wrong. I'd never thought about it, but it was true. We didn't talk much more that day. Just enough to make me too aware of her, of the way her fingers curled loosely around her cup, of the way her scarf brushed against her jaw when she moved. I caught myself folding my napkin into tight squares, unfolding it, then folding it again. That night, I almost typed something out to her. Ridiculous, because I didn't even have her number. Just this urge, like there was something left unfinished between us. Instead, I stared at a blank message box meant for someone else, then locked my phone and left it on the desk. The days blurred. Sometimes we spoke, sometimes we didn't. But she had this way of looking up when I walked in, like she'd already been expecting me. It was enough to make the silence between us feel louder than the conversations we never had. Then came the voice note. I was sitting in the back, laptop open but untouched, when my phone buzzed. Unknown number. I almost ignored it until the second ping came through, an audio message. I pressed play without thinking. Her voice filled the space between my earbuds. Low, unguarded. "I don't know if I should have said what I said earlier. It's not the kind of thing people should overhear." A pause, a faint sound of her exhaling. "I just forget it. Delete this." I froze. I hadn't spoken to her that morning. Not a word. And yet here was her voice, raw in my ears, carrying a weight she clearly hadn't meant for me. The cafe noise went on around me, cups clinking, chairs scraping. My coffee had gone cold. I stared at the message like it might disappear if I looked away. She was still there, by the window, reading the same book. Except now, I couldn't unhear her. And I didn't know if I should press play again, or pretend it never happened. I didn't reply to the voice note. I didn't delete it either. It stayed there in my phone like a secret I wasn't supposed to hold. The next morning, I walked into the cafe telling myself I'd act normal, that maybe she'd look at me the same way she always did, and I'd convince myself I'd imagined the whole thing. But when I saw her, she didn't look up. Her book was open, eyes fixed somewhere past the page. I ordered my drink, tapped the lid twice like I always did, and slid into the chair across from her without really asking. She glanced up then, startled, and half smiled. "You don't usually sit here." I shrugged, pretending it was casual. "Wi-Fi's better by the window." It wasn't. We both knew it. For a while, the only sound between us was the stirring of my spoon against porcelain. She wrapped her hands around her cup, like she needed the warmth more than the drink. Finally, she spoke. "You remind me of my son." The words landed strangely, too heavy for how softly she said them. I shifted in my seat, not sure if that was meant to push me away or pull me closer. "He's your age," she added, eyes flicking toward mine before sliding back down. Well, a little older. He doesn't talk to me much anymore. Calls when he needs something. That's all. I didn't know what to say. A part of me wanted to tell her I'd listen, that I wouldn't treat her like an afterthought. Instead, I folded the corner of my napkin until it was a sharp triangle and set it down again. Guess that's just how it goes, I murmured. Her smile was thin, tired. Maybe. We sat there, two people pretending to be casual, while everything unsaid gathered like fog between us. My mind kept looping, the voice note, her voice low and uncertain, that hint of confession not meant for me. I wanted to ask about it, but some instinct told me not to. Later, when she stood to leave, she dropped her scarf. I bent to pick it up before she noticed. The fabric was soft, faintly carrying her perfume. I hesitated, thumb brushing the edge, then handed it back. You'd forget your head if it wasn't attached, I said, attempting a weak smile. Her eyes met mine for a fraction longer than they should have. Something flickered there, gratitude, maybe, or something heavier she wasn't letting show. Good thing you're here, then, she said quietly. It wasn't much. Just a line tossed out like nothing. But it stuck, replaying in my head long after she walked out the door. I don't know why that moment stayed with me. Maybe because it felt like someone finally saw me. The cafe had become too obvious. Too patterned. Maybe that's why she stopped coming for a week. Or maybe she just needed space. I told myself not to notice, but every morning I still looked at her empty seat by the window. When she finally appeared again, it wasn't in the cafe. I saw her outside the small grocery store near campus, balancing a paper bag against her hip, keys dangling between her fingers. She looked different there, less composed, like the world hadn't given her time to arrange herself before stepping outside. Need a hand? I asked, already reaching for the bag. She blinked, surprised, then let me take it. Thanks. It's heavier than it looks. We walked side by side toward her building. A quiet street, just the sound of our footsteps. She asked about school. I asked about her book, the one I'd seen her reading a dozen times but never finishing. The kind of small talk that covers something larger. At her door, I hesitated, not sure if I should hand the bag over and leave. She pushed it open, stepped inside, then glanced back. You can set it on the counter. Her apartment smelled faintly of tea leaves and something citrus. The space was neat, lived in. I placed the bag down, noticing how her hands lingered over the fruit as she unpacked. There was a stillness, like the air was waiting for one of us to move first. Then, knock on the door. Sharp, sudden. She startled, wiping her palms on her jeans. It's probably my neighbor. She borrows sugar more than she should. I stepped back as she opened the door. It wasn't Sugar. A man stood there, maybe in his 50s, holding a toolbox. He gave her a smile that seemed too familiar, then nodded toward me. Didn't know you had company. Her voice wavered only slightly. Just a student from next door. Helping me carry some things. Student. That's what I was, technically. Still, the words sat heavy in my chest. The man left after a short exchange. She closed the door and leaned against it for a second, her eyes darting anywhere but mine. Sorry. He's helpful sometimes. I nodded, though the air between us had shifted. She busied herself with the tea kettle, avoiding my gaze. I stood there, wanting to say something, anything, that would make sense of the sudden distance. When she finally placed a cup in front of me, her hand brushed mine. Just barely. She pulled back quickly, almost too quickly, but the touch lingered in the space between us. I should have left then. Instead, I sat. We sipped in silence, the clock ticking on the wall louder than it should have been. At one point, her eyes lifted to mine, and neither of us looked away. A half-beat too long. A half-breath too close. I don't know who moved first. Maybe either of us did. But for a moment, it felt inevitable, that if one of us leaned even slightly forward, the whole balance would tip. And then the kettle hissed louder, breaking whatever spell had nearly pulled us across the line. We both looked away at the same time. It happened on a walk. Not planned, not arranged. I ran into her as she was heading back from the market, the light just fading, her bag heavy with things she probably didn't need to carry alone. "Let me," I offered, reaching for it before she could argue. She hesitated, then gave in. "You don't have to keep rescuing me." "I don't mind," I said. And I didn't. We fell into step along the quiet street. Leaves skittered across the pavement. For a while neither of us spoke. The silence wasn't awkward, it was charged, humming with words neither of us had the courage to say. Then she asked, almost offhand, "Why do you spend so much time with me?" I froze, just a half-second too long before answering. "I like the company." Her lips pressed into a line, as if she didn't quite believe me. She looked straight ahead, shoulders tight. "You're 20. You should be with people your own age." "Not me. Not me." 2 words said like a warning. I gripped the bag tighter, felt the plastic handles cut into my palm. "And what if I don't want that?" Her steps faltered, just slightly. "You don't know what you want." "Not really." We stopped near a bench under the streetlight. She lowered herself down, exhaling like the weight she carried had nothing to do with groceries. I sat beside her, too close and not close enough. "You think this is harmless," she said softer now. "Coffee, walks, little talks." "But it's not. People notice things. They assume things." There it was, the wall cracking. Guilt seeping through. I leaned forward, elbows on my knees. "Let them notice." She gave me a sharp look. Not angry exactly. More afraid. "Don't say that. You don't understand." Her voice trembled at the edges, and I realized she wasn't talking about them. She was talking about herself. I turned to her then, really looked at her. The faint lines by her eyes, the way her hands twisted in her lap like she was holding herself back from something. "You're wrong," I said quietly. "I do understand." She didn't answer right away. The streetlight buzzed overhead. Somewhere, a dog barked. I could hear her breathing, quick, uneven. Finally, she whispered, "If you keep looking at me like that, I don't know if I can stop." It wasn't a confession. Not exactly. But it broke something open between us. I wanted to reach for her hand, to close the distance. The urge was so strong it felt physical, like leaning over a cliff's edge. But I stayed where I was. She stared straight ahead, eyes shining with something I couldn't name. And in the silence, the question hung there, thick and unavoidable: what happens if we don't stop? After that night on the bench, everything shifted. Not in words, because nothing had been said outright, but in the silence that followed. She stopped coming to the cafe. The first day, I told myself she was busy. The second, maybe she was sick. By the fourth, I started arriving earlier, later, trying different times, as if I could catch her in the act of avoiding me. But her seat by the window stayed empty. It was strange how absence could feel louder than presence. Every cup clink, every scraping chair just underlined the fact she wasn't there. I'd open my laptop, stare at the same sentence for an hour, close it again. People came and went. None of them were her. One night, passing her building, I slowed down. Her window was lit. I could see her silhouette moving inside, pacing, stopping, pacing again. For a second, I thought about knocking. My hand even hovered near the buzzer. But I didn't. The next morning, I found myself outside her door anyway, bag of oranges in my hand, an excuse I barely believed. I stood there, rehearsing what I'd say if she answered. But I never pressed the bell. Left the bag on the step like some anonymous offering and walked away before anyone saw. Days later, she appeared again. Not at the cafe, but on the street. She was walking with a man, older, maybe her ex-husband. He carried himself like someone who still believed he belonged beside her. She laughed at something he said, a laugh too polished, too careful. She saw me across the street. Our eyes met for just a moment. Then she looked away, quick, decisive, like closing a book mid-sentence. That night, I almost messaged her. My thumb hovered over the keyboard. Did I do something? Are you okay? Do you want me to stop? Words came and went, erased before they could settle. In the end, nothing was sent. Instead, I sat in my room, phone on the desk, screen black. I imagined her reading my silence like I'd been reading hers. The thing was, I didn't feel heartbroken. I felt paused. Like life forgot to finish the sentence. The cafe seat stayed empty. The voice note stayed on my phone. And I stayed waiting, half convinced she might walk in again. It wasn't the cafe, or the street, or some chance meeting. It was her doorstep. I hadn't planned to go, not really. But my feet carried me there, and suddenly I was standing outside her apartment, staring at the chipped paint of her door. This time I knocked. For a long stretch, nothing. Then the sound of the lock turning. She opened the door halfway, surprise flickering across her face before she masked it. You shouldn't be here. I know. We stood there in the narrow hall, the air thick with everything unsaid. I almost left. Then she stepped back, just enough. Come in, if you're already here. Her kitchen light was dim, casting long shadows across the counter. She busied herself with the kettle, though I doubted either of us really wanted tea. Finally she spoke, her back to me. I thought, if I stayed away, maybe it would go back to what it was. Just coffee. Just passing by. She turned, hands braced against the counter. But it doesn't, does it? I shook my head. No. It doesn't. Her eyes softened, but her voice was careful. You're 20. She stopped, exhaling. I know better than this. I know you do, I said quietly. And I still keep showing up. A silence stretched between us, long and sharp. Then she moved to sit at the small kitchen table, fingers folding and unfolding the edge of a napkin. I sat across from her, close enough to notice the tremor in her hands. You think this is something it's not, she said. I swallowed. Then tell me what it is. Her eyes met mine, steady now, unblinking. It's loneliness. Yours. Mine. Filling a space for each other. Her honesty hit like a weight. But beneath it, something else flickered, too fragile to name. Maybe it is, I admitted. But it's not only that. She looked down, then back up. Her voice was low, almost breaking. Do you know what people would say if they knew? Yes. And still? And still. The kettle whistled faintly, forgotten. Neither of us moved to silence it. She leaned back, eyes closing for a moment as if the fight in her was running thin. When she opened them again, the exhaustion had given way to something else, something raw, unguarded. I don't know if I can be what you think I am, she whispered. You don't have to be anything, I said. Just here. For the first time in weeks, she let the silence settle without filling it. Slowly, almost cautiously, she reached across the table. Her fingertips brushed mine, light as if testing whether the world would allow it. I didn't pull away. Her lips curved into the faintest smile, tired but real. Okay, she said. It didn't change overnight. Nothing ever really does. Some mornings, she still avoided the cafe. Other days, I'd sit by the window alone, staring at the empty seat across from me, unsure if she'd come. But then, one Tuesday at exactly 8:47 a.m., she walked in. No hesitation, no careful glances. Just sat down like it had always been her place. Still the cappuccino with 1 sugar? She asked, a small smile tugging at her mouth. Still the black coffee that goes cold before you finish it? I replied. That became the rhythm. Not every day, not a routine anyone else would notice. Just enough. Enough that the silence didn't ache anymore. Sometimes we walked together after, down streets that didn't matter, past shops we didn't enter. Sometimes she'd make tea in her kitchen, the kettle's whistle softer now, less like a warning and more like a signal we'd both agreed to ignore. She never gave me speeches about the gap between us again. I never pressed her for promises. It wasn't about that. It was about showing up. About letting the days stack until they felt steady. Once, on the bench under the streetlight, I caught her watching me the way she used to watch her unread book, like she already knew the ending but still wanted to turn the pages slowly. She said nothing, just reached into her bag, pulled out an orange, and handed it to me without explanation. I peeled it in silence, handed her half. That was the whole conversation. And somehow, it was enough. Her son called sometimes. I heard the clipped tone, the rehearsed laughter. She didn't tell me much about him, not directly. But I noticed the way her shoulders dropped after she hung up, like holding herself up had become a habit too heavy to keep forever. On those days, she stayed a little longer at the cafe. I think we both understood something important. This wasn't about filling emptiness. It wasn't about proving people wrong, or right. It wasn't about age, or guilt, or what anyone else thought. It was about not being paused anymore. About letting the sentence finish, however ordinary the words turned out to be. One night, sitting at her kitchen table, I realized my napkin was still folded into triangles, just like the first time. She noticed too. Some habits, she said softly, don't need breaking. I smiled. Guess not. The kettle hummed on the stove. She leaned her hand against mine, the same way she had the night everything shifted, except this time neither of us pulled back. No declarations. No promises. Just a quiet, steady presence. And I thought, maybe this is what it means to stay. Sparkles, did this story stay with you? What kind of quiet, real love stories do you want to hear next? Share your thoughts. Your idea might be the next story told here.